Does say we're streaming. Yep. Oh, really? Sorry, it's stream is fine. It's just saying I'm streaming something I'm not. It's
Okay.
I'm still a bit new to the Twitch.
No, it's all right. It's weird. So I don't have your image on my phone. I have it on my desktop because I have a link up just to like see it working. So yeah, just weird. Just weird.
I'm just gonna post in the Facebook group too, let people know we're live, or the Facebook event page or whatever it's called. I'll do it from here. Why do they make every user interface worse over time? Just trying to make a simple post to like the event. I can't even see where the thing is anymore. Oh, here it is. All right. Yep. So I posted it. Probably give it maybe just another few minutes because I don't want to like start if there's like 0 people here.
Okay.
Meantime, I'm just gonna wait for some people. Yep. So got a few questions prepared already, and I might think of some more as we go along.
Okay.
Right, so we're getting some people in. Yep. So if people that are just coming in, we're just giving it another minute or two, then we're going to get started. Just want to give people a chance to get in. Right, so it's been about 5 minutes since the stream started. I think we can go ahead and get started. I guess people will just come along as we get started. So I guess first thing I would probably want to do is introduce band being interviewed. So we are interviewing Nahja Mora right now. So they're a band that's at least local to me. They're an industrial band out of Baltimore. Interestingly enough, the first band I saw when I moved into Baltimore, they were like playing, I think, either a day or two after I moved here. So that was my first show that I got to when we moved here. And I'm going to give Joseph now an opportunity to introduce himself as well.
Okay, I'm Joseph Saint of Nahja Mora. I play in Nahja Mora with my friends Jenny Raymate and Jeff Byers and Hobart Blankenberg. May his soul eternally rest. We are an expressionist electronic group, multimedia and thought process.
I think actually a good question to start with is, so when you say multimedia, what do you specifically mean by that? So how do you kind of do like the non-music parts of your shows?
Okay, I think in terms of music, in terms of color, it's hard for me to explain that, but when I hear music, I see color. It's one part. I'm also an experienced video editor and an actor. And the way that Nahja Mora is meant to be is kind of a media overload coming at someone. When we perform live, I do performance art, and we use projection and light shows. We kind of want to assault on all senses, just trying to get the message across that's in the music. I would point it to the theater of cruelty, to be honest. Those types of ideas that you have to push outside the theater itself for people to really feel what you're trying to get across. That's why I would call it multimedia.
That makes sense. I actually kind of sort of relate and understand kind of like seeing music as colors. I don't think I directly have synesthesia, but I always associate certain like sounds and timbres with colors. So it's kind of interesting that you try to sort of like present that in like a visual aspect as well.
It can be very striking because things can just oddly end up being a strange color that does not work in terms of theory with other colors or relate to one another. But that's not something that necessarily, I don't know that everyone perceives or not, but it's, anything can be reduced to a mental illness, I suppose, or a gift. I'm not sure.
So we got a few questions from Chris. Maybe we can go start with those before I move on to some of the other ones I got. So one of the questions Chris is asking, what is your favorite album that you produced and why?
The most recent one, because it took so much work and we put so much of ourselves into it. It's, I think, the most direct message of what each concept is. It's a kind of a unifying album across the others. The message behind it all is we have to take care of one another.
I did get a chance to give the album a proper listen before doing the interview, and I'll say I really liked it. I'm going to post a Bandcamp link in the chat in case people are interested in checking that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I might post it again later too, since we don't have a lot of people in right now, but it's a good starting place. And also we got Chris asking one more question, which is, what are your inspirations that formed Nahja Mora's sound?
Nahja Mora was formed in 2005, shortly after I was sexually assaulted. That's one of the key things about it. My musical influences, if that's what Chris means in terms of his inspirations, Arnold Schoenberg, Mental Fixer, Mentallo and the Fixer, and Mystique a little bit. Tori Amos, Coil, definitely Coil, Chris and Cozy. Crick and Nine Inch Nails. I would draw from them.
I definitely really love Mentallo and the Fixer in particular. I definitely can kind of get some of those vibes from your music.
Thank you. They're wonderful people too. That whole San Antonio scene, just being able to interact with them and speak with them through Hobart's friendship that he earned with them, they are just all such wonderful people. It's amazing. It's amazing to find people that make such scary, bestial, in-your-face music, and they are friendly and down to earth. There's few that you meet like that. Mental and Fixer is one that comes to mind. Jihad is another, and Bile, and that's all I'm going to say.
Yep. So I guess I'll go on to the first question I got written down. I'm probably going to ask them out of order because I didn't really have a planned order to ask them from. But I guess a good one to start with might be, so where did you kind of get the name for your band from?
Okay. A lot of Nahja Mora has to do with the idea that language itself is a war. That there is a lot in language itself. We are rolled over by media. We are massaged into it, and we are formed into fear based on language. Language can impress on us insecurities or confidence. Just words on a page or words uttered. Things that aren't meant can be perceived by the listener. And then we have the phenomenon of the East versus the West. Things that are just hidden and not understood, and therefore they're scary or feared. Being that Nahja Mora delivers messages of unrest, I chose to pull from languages that are somewhat lost from the Central European region, particularly old religions of the people that historically were the Westerners' enemies, Eastern European people. Nahja is it's a psychopomp, kind of like Shar leads the souls to the dead. Nahja is a mispronunciation of that, purposefully. Mora means a lot of different things in a lot of different languages. It can mean moth, it can mean spring, it can mean astral projection. Language itself is a weapon, and we are in a war of language. And Nahja Mora is the nightmares of the psychopomp.
Right.
I hope that was sensible.
Yeah, no, that makes quite a bit of sense. It especially kind of reminded me sort of how, like, I noticed someone, I think it was like some video on YouTube or whatever, someone was pointing out how a lot of times in movies, for example, East versus West is a very common thing, and a lot of times you see someone with, like, Eastern European descent in a movie, they're almost always the villain.
Yes. Yeah, but I think on the flip side, probably in cultures that are our enemies, as it were, if you think of everything in terms of binary, we're the enemies to them. It's very complex, everything is. It can't be boiled down to binary. Nothing can.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so think about which next one I'm going to ask. So, yeah, I guess for next one I'm going to ask is, so how did you get started, I guess, with music, specifically, like, just writing music, making it, playing anything, sort of like the early beginning stuff?
Well, my family had a piano. My family was fairly musical. My parents weren't particularly. My sisters both studied music, but it was more like a hobby. We had a piano. I started playing it because I enjoyed it. We had a computer. I got into making music on computers. I actually particularly fell in love with the sound of the Nintendo Entertainment System. And That's one of the reasons why I use so much FM synthesis, to be honest. I absolutely loved the sound of the strings in Legend of Zelda 1 and 2, and that's one of the first sounds I programmed in my DX7. I would say chip music is a big influence on me. But working with digital audio, a lot of people started in analog synthesizers. That's where it felt or feels or seems that everyone kind of starts out with an analog synthesizer or a guitar, and I kind of started on a piano and a computer where I would cut up samples and arrange them into Cakewalk 6.0, which had 8 tracks of audio, and that's where I started. I had a teenage band called Disgrace Insult that turned into Cried, and eventually formed into Nahja Mora.
Right, so next one. Guess also to kind of continue on. Well, actually, I feel like Chris kind of already answered that question. I was going to ask what bands you kind of grew up on. No, I don't know if that's kind of a little bit too similar to what Chris already asked.
Oh, no, I can answer that. That's a good question. Because, like, 90s, okay? I grew up on the Misfits, Corpus Delicti. Let me phrase this question a little better. Is he asking what bands I grew up with when I was, like, a teenager, or bands that were active in a scene? Because I listened to a lot of older music, even when I was younger.
I think it's interesting to kind of answer both. I think it's always interesting to ask what people's early childhood influences were, as well as the stuff that they picked when they were like growing up and being able to more pick their own choices.
And realistically, they're going to overlap. Let's see. So, like I mentioned, Corpus Delicti, the Misfits. I really like Corpus Delicti. I would say they're one of the best goth bands in the world.
Definitely agree with that. One of my faves too.
They just nailed it. Throbbing Gristle, Chris and Cozy, Coil, generally that whole group. I just never was that into psychic TV. Skinny Puppy, Kevorkian, and Death Cycle. I loved Kevorkian and Death Cycle. Mental and the Fixer, which I mentioned. Battery, my God, Battery are my gods forever. Sean is a good friend of mine. I love Battery. I cannot talk enough about Battery. And of course, Monty Gazaza. I love Monty. Great man. Let's see who else is wonderful I grew up with. Coil. I mentioned them. I said that before group. Susie and the Banshees. You know, it's hard to think of things in the moment. I did say Skinny Puppy.
Yep, I remember that.
The Fixer. I could jump around a whole bunch of nonsense of things. Propaganda.
Love them too.
Is a big band to me. You love Propaganda?
Yep.
Propaganda is wonderful. Oh, yeah. Propaganda is fascinating too, because if you listen to their really early music, they were trying to change the world earnestly. And one of the things that I love about Propaganda is they're such great musicians, and you can see that they put so much work into their songs, into their playing, into the melodic structure, even from a young age. But the thing that's the most resoundingly scary thing to realize for a band like Propaganda that we have all grown up with, you can listen to their early music where they believed they were going to be able to change the world, and listen to what they do now, and they're generally saying, hold on and kiss your butt cheeks goodbye. That, you know, you got to find happiness where it is, but it's hopeless.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing to hear a band like that, but it's telling to the reality.
Guess to continue on that note, what are some of your favorite current bands?
Favorite current bands that I enjoy: Sleigh Bells, Cobble, Fun Never Starts, Rose McDowell. I recently got into Rose McDowell from Listen to Coil, and I adore her voice in that group, but I adore her songwriting ability too. And she's just a beautiful soul. I listen to the hell out of her. I don't know. I haven't listened to too much new music.
Yeah. So I guess it's interesting you mentioned Fun Never Starts, because that can kind of segue.
Risks. I should mention them. They're really good. Dread Risks. Yeah.
So I believe
Risks is a new band. They're really good. But go on with your
so I believe Fun Never Starts. I'm pretty sure there's a local Baltimore band. I think I've seen them once before. Which kind of leads me into my question, sort of, how do you feel in general about the local music scene in Baltimore? Both goth and in general, I guess. Or goth and industrial and in general, I guess.
I would only really speak towards the industrial scene, and I am very proud of it. I remember, like, playing Club Orpheus in 2000 or The Vault in 1999 and nobody being there in my teenage industrial band. And larger bands skipping us over for DC. That was the history until, I don't know what happened. I know Eagle Likeness is from here, but they're in Hartford County. Nahja Mora is from here, Fun Never Starts is from here, Cobble's from here, Hex Me is from here, Curse is from here. We have a great industrial scene. Imbue is from here. Under the Noise is from here. Biofeedback was from here. We have a long history. Michael Ross is a friend of mine, and I can never remember how to pronounce this band, whether it's Mick Glitter or Mike Glitter, but his work is brilliant, and he's in a suburb of Baltimore and DC, and his work is worth looking at. I love the scene here. There's so much development. There's so much new work coming out, and there's so many things happening constantly, not just in industrial music or goth music, but in the industrial scene in Maryland with High Zero and all of the things that we have.
Interestingly enough, Mike Litter is actually in the chat right now.
Oh, of course he is. Hi, Michael. How do you pronounce your name?
No, hopefully he'll respond to that soon. Like, I feel like there's always a little bit of a lag between the video being done live and the what I'm seeing on Twitch. It may just be the video, but it could be like the text too. But if he answers how to pronounce it, I will be sure to let you know. And I guess continuing that, but in general, if you could do a show with any band, either currently around or one that might have been dissolved, which band would you pick? Or I guess maybe even bands, because usually there's more than 2 bands at a show.
Oh, like I could plan the show and I could play with any 2 bands I want?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay, let me think about this. It'd be fun. Living or dead? Is that what you said?
Yeah, living, dead, dissolved, still around.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Only 2. Okay. Me, Nahja Mora, with Body Counts, supporting Old Dirty Bastard. Surprised?
Not too much. I feel like
love that.
rap and industrial actually have kind of like a pretty similar approach to music making.
They do, and actually speaking to the newer groups, if you ask them that I'm listening to, when people ask me that, I often think of the historic industrial goth club scene, and that is its own music industry in itself, but industrial and goth, for that matter, is kind of spreading out and coming from all directions right now. A lot of the best stuff coming out now is coming from the hip-hop scene. Clipping, Death Grips, Benefits. Yeah, the Old Dirty Bastard himself. If you listen to, I won't say the album, please, you'll hear some industrial elements, even though it's produced by fucking Pharrell. But yeah, they do, like you said, Zazzy, overlap. It's true. You know, I remember somewhere, I think it was Rap Music Industrial, a joke that in industrial music we distort our vocals, but in rap music they don't really have to, but they're talking about the same thing. Same type of urban decay, sampled beats, electronic music, same ideas. And I was not trying to say something racial that's what it is. That's why we distort our vocals and they don't. They have hip hop artists have a point to get across. Industrial artists want to use the medium itself and its distortion of the voice to make the point a little bit hidden, because the mission is possible also, and historically that information is a war and we have to fight to get information.
This kind of reminds me of a really interesting fact I know. So if anyone's heard of like the old 80s goth band Southern Death Cult, their drummer actually later on went on to form an Islamic hip hop group, Fundamental, and like it's like one of the most interesting things that I've like one of the last things I would have ever guessed. And more interestingly, they've also worked with Pop Will Eat itself, so it almost kind of comes a little bit in like almost full circle.
That's where it was familiar when you mentioned Fundamental. They did a remix on the Two Fingers, My Friends, that remix album. Yeah, I had no idea that was the back. But people do flip into all different genres. I can only think of things that are kind of silly, and something like that that's very impressive, like Michael Bolton singing hair metal to what he does now, or Information Society. Freestyle synth pop gone to very, very, very gothic electro-industrial rock, or whatever Are You Afraid was.
Yeah, I remember they kind of went and they almost did sort of like a Gary Newman type of direction shift. I think.
Yeah, I would say that he went towards the Gary Newman branch, but then he was like, I feel like skinny pumping. So he was going towards Gary Newman, and he's like, let's add on a little bit of skinny pumping, because that's what it sounds like to me, with all the little horror elements that seem a little bit out of place. But, why are we critiquing Information Society right now? I want to know what you're thinking.
So, Mike kind of like answered, but he wrote out it's pronounced M-I-C, which I'm guessing, which is still confusing because M-I-C can be spelled Mike or Mick. Ow.
Is it M-I-C litter, Mike? M-I-C litter? Come on, we're promoing you. Or is it Mick litter, like an Irish litter? Or is it Mike litter, like it's the trash of a microphone? I'm being earnest. No, I would text him, but I'm using the phone. Anyway.
Right, so guess next one probably gonna ask is so what's kind of your like process for coming up with songs, writing them, recording them?
Absolutely unpredictable. I end up messing with something until I like it. I don't know what I'll be using to start with. Sometimes it's my voice, sometimes it's a keyboard, sometimes it's just noises, it's sequencing, it could be a computer system, it could be a clarinet, for Christ's sake. It comes from anything. I like to just develop sounds. If I don't end up making them into a song, I'll make them into something else. I'll use them to make sounds, samples, make a little bit more point of what I'm saying. I can't nail down a singular method that I use. I told one of my friends when he had writer's block to try this, to make a loop of 4 bars and make it the coolest 4 bars you could. Like start with bass line or whatever, or drums, and just keep on with those 4 bars and then copy them and loop them. Copy them 4 times. Maybe add some variation, see if that inspires you. That's one way to start writing. It can come from anything.
Kind of moves on to sort of like the next question I've got. So I realize this kind of depends on a lot of times with how any given artist that works with synths creates their music, but sort of what's your approach to playing your songs live? Because I know with some electronic musicians, they kind of like have to switch stuff up a little bit, or they take a different approach live than how it might sound on record. Is there any like special considerations or things you do for when you're doing a live show?
yes, some things we just cannot play live, but we will find a way eventually. There are wants to play songs like Dream Dead, which would be quite an undertaking live. But as for like technical things that we do, it comes out in rehearsal. Like how I run Nahja Mora, for lack of a better term, is I find people that are musically skilled and musically able to communicate something that they want to. They feel something. And then I say, here's this something I wrote. Would you like to add something to it? And then they say yes or no. That's tends to be how I work with other people in the group and in general. I kind of write independently, and I kind of lost track of my writing or thinking in this. But what was your question again? I kind of got confused for a second.
So what kind of like approach do you kind of take to translating your songs to like a live environment, sort of?
Live environment. So it goes back to what I was saying with. I understand my problem. I was talking about our recording process when I should have been talking about rehearsal process. For live, how it works is I set up things that we're going to perform live, and then I talk to the people that we're playing with live and fellow musicians that are in the group, and ask them if they can play these parts, or if they want to play these parts, or if they think they can come up with a part that will accentuate what I already have. That tends to be how we work. So live, it can be an entirely different experience. Probably absolutely for Actualizer, Tracy Moore, Final Realization of Failure, and As Death, that really sounds like just me in the studio with overdubs. With the new album, we worked on it with me writing it, but it was such a back and forth that album is indicative of what we sound like live now. Our previous albums do not sound like what we sound like live. I think that kind of answered the question in a completely roundabout way. That was not intentional, but
yeah, that answers the question pretty good.
Okay.
So yeah, what was I going to ask next? Oh, we got a few questions from the crowd again. So I think Chris has another couple of questions. So one of them is, have you ever had the opportunity to play with any of your musical heroes?
That's a loaded question. I got to play with the Cox. That was pretty cool. That was very cool. We got to play with Front 242 too. That was very cool. Front 242 were so incredibly friendly towards us and put on such an incredible show. And the Cox, those guys, and one of them is in Front 242, Richard. Paul is a god among men. I mean, that meme that says, find someone that looks at you like the way Trent Reznor looks at Paul Barker. Paul Barker earned that look. He's one of the nicest people that I've ever met. When we played with the Cox, after they played, it was the same night as the DJ's birthday. He got shipwrecked. Paul held him up when he was falling down a few times, and after that, Paul spent, I want to say, about an hour chatting with Jenny, our bassist, about her instrument and his historic instrument. He watched us while we were sound checking. It's amazing to have that experience of someone that is a legend, that takes you seriously and gives you their attention because they care about the community and the scene of music.
Yep. And next one we got. Okay, so we've also got a few different questions from Chris. It's kind of like down on the list now. Next one is kind of, I guess, just asking what your pronouns are, just so he doesn't misgender you.
Oh, he.
All right.
Yeah. He, him.
And next one is this is a pretty important question, honestly. So next question we got is, when is your next show for Nahja Mora?
We don't have any booked.
Right. Yep. And next one is, what is your advice for people trying to start off in music?
Just do it and not listen to anyone else. Don't let anyone else tell you what you should do. Do what you feel you need to do or want to do. If you speak to any musician that you look up to, or they come to speak with you, make sure that they are there to help you, not just trying to make you into something that you're not. Keep your voice your own and never play to the gallery. And remember, we all got to take care of one another.
Yep. Got Mike chiming in saying that your encouragement was kind of a key to you for them finally releasing their EP.
Well, thank you, Mike. That's Mike, right?
Yep,
yeah.
It's Mike.
Michael, thank you.
And one more, Chris, we got, what's your most memorable tour story?
Well, we have not toured yet because we had a death in our band last year, and generally we just haven't really wanted to. Things were coming together to do so, but then the pandemic struck, and a lot of things struck with one of our former members, leading to his untimely death. Ideally, we would like to tour this fall, and I would like to get the balls rolling on that. Jeff and Jenny both have things going on in their personal life, and well, that gets sorted out, and of course my personal life, then we can start looking at that. And the aim is to do that this fall tour.
Definitely be looking forward to that. So if anyone's here from not in the area, keep your eyes peeled in case you see Nahja Mora touring. Definitely a really enjoyable show to go see. And just for people who don't know, I'm going to post a link to their latest album in the chat again. All right, so I think I've got like another question here. So I know you mentioned you do some multimedia, so what's kind of your process for creating some of like the multimedia you use for your live shows?
I subscribe a lot to montage theory, particularly ideas in Soviet montage, where certain things put together can leave tonal messages. So I can use pretty much any piece of film that I can find that I feel like combined with another piece of film can provide a greater symbol based in those two together, or three or four, or however many you want. That tends to be my major mechanism in terms of like editing or film for projection. In terms of lights and stuff, it's overloading consciousness, or I mean that sounds pretty outlandish. Let's be real, kind of like an overload of senses. That's what the lights are for. That's why we kind of have a glow and aim them towards the audience or towards ourselves upward. And sometimes we use the jackhammer live. The idea in terms of our multimedia stage work, though, tends to be earned while putting together the set list. The songs in context or catalyst towards the greater meaning. And then I can think out a plot. And for instance, in October last year, when we played with Front 242, that performance was supposed to elicit someone falling apart until they ultimately allow their id to take over and they become radicalized to the point of becoming a spree shooter. That's where that ended until, I said that this was an experiment and zoned out in drumming before we left the stage. Plots don't necessarily aren't necessarily politically like motivated or influenced, I would say. They don't necessarily come out of what's happening in current events, but I always try to point them towards some type of social commentary. That tends to be the live message, at least.
So we got another viewer question kind of expanding on this. And it's asking, do you feel that certain kinds of multimedia speak to the crowd more than others? And if so, which elements work best when doing a live show?
It's hard to predict what an audience goes for in one way or the other. The only unifying thing that could be viewed as universal is energy. If you have the energy to communicate what you need to communicate, whether it be, your own blood sugar or protein or whatever, or even your psychic energy or energy of love, and you have that intent and you perform it to communicate the message that you want to, and you can get that audience on the same wavelength, that's where it really comes through. If you put the energy into your films and your projections, and that energy is off the hook, let's say, and it's just makes people want to move, that can be part of it. If it's your lights, it doesn't necessarily, it's not one thing or the other. It's not like, oh, I need my projections. It really comes down to the energy that you put out and something that people can hook onto. That's the only thing you have to focus on. You can be a high multimedia band and you're just an iPod playing back a stereo sequence and a dude run around on stage. Fetus was just that, except with a tape machine. So was Nine Inch Nails, except with a drummer or keyboardist. It's all about the performance. It doesn't necessarily go down to classist things as to the materials you have or the synthesizers you have or the goods you have. It's the energy that you put into your live performance and into your work.
Yep, I definitely feel like that's kind of important. Like, usually when people say, oh, I enjoyed this live show, usually their comments a lot of times are really on, like, the energy. They're like, I really enjoyed the energy of this band. You don't really ever hear someone say, oh, I like this band, but when I went over to look at, like, their synths or their pedal board or something, I didn't like the gear they were using. I've never really heard anyone, like, comment on that so much. So much is more about the performance, putting projection out there.
Oddly enough, I have heard people comment on things like that, especially people that are really into seeing synthesizers live. They get really into the idea that it's important to see gear on stage with a group, and I don't understand that because it's cool. It's nice to see something in person, but it's classist. Not everybody can afford these things. Some people are going to make some of the coolest music you possibly imagine on an old netbook from the early 2000s. And more power to them, but they deserve an audience, and they don't deserve people just to be like, oh, well, it's not Dallas, so forget that.
I've always been surprised when I've listened to stuff. I'm thinking, oh, they must be using some really impressive stuff. And a lot of times it's not necessarily the most fancy stuff. It's just the way people use it, how creative they are with it. And I know one thing I've been trying to train myself to do less is, although I'm like really interested in the equipment, I'm starting to train myself. It's like, is it really that important to go like see if you can go see it on stage? And it's like, no, not really. Just sit and enjoy the show, watch the band play, talk to your friends. Don't I guess if you catch a glimpse, you do, but like, don't be that weirdo who goes up to the stage before the band's playing and just go looking and, oh, I see that there and I see that there. Trying to like stop doing that.
Well, it's different strokes for different folks. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. What I'm saying is that nobody should just decide that a band isn't worth watching because they're not Dallas. That's what I'm speaking to. Like, there are people in the electronic music community that want to see synthesizers sense to me. It really does feel like a class. It's almost like a show and tell type situation. Like, hey, look at this gear that I have. This is why I'm professional, and you should pay attention to me. It's weird.
Yeah, definitely, especially like with the DAW listing. I've looked into how expensive that is, and it's like way more expensive to do like some of the more elaborate stuff with no DAW. It's like way more expensive than you could like possibly imagine for, I guess, for someone who's not into making music.
Yeah, it's ridiculously more expensive. It is getting cheaper, but that's also because of Behringer and companies that it's just because of the neoliberal world that we're in right now, with everything being made cheap, so that our environment is destroyed and our cost of labor is low. I mean, it's so great. I digress, but
no, I kind of agree with that. I'm like, does everyone really need a copy of a Moog and like a copy of the Pro 1, a copy of the 303, and a copy of like every synthesizer released in the 80s? I mean, and sure, it's kind of interesting, but I don't feel like it's like super necessary to like be making music. Certainly not at like the costs sometimes that goes into making all this stuff.
What I'm trying to say is like, that's not. I don't like things being inflated for stupid reasons, to be honest. I kind of think that the prices on some of these analog things are way overblown. But you think back, and some things that are cheap now were expensive 10 years ago, and back and forth with trends. Right now, modular is what's really trendy, and I don't understand this at all, because it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, you can buy a cheap synthesizer if you really need a synthesizer, and something vintage that has, if you're doing some subtractive, the oscillator, the filter, the amplifier, and that's all in one package, and it's usually polyphonal. But then you get into modular, and people are telling you got to use modular, and then it's like $500 for just the oscillator, and that becomes an addiction itself, getting more and more things. And really, what I feel that everyone should be doing is just making music, and in the world of industrial music and electronic music and punk music, it should be what you have and what you can make, what you can do, what you can afford, and it should be experimental, and it shouldn't be dictated to you that you need certain things or that you need to be a certain way for people to listen to what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's mostly it for any questions I have, but I'm going to probably take it to the chat real quick. If anyone else has any questions they want to ask, go ahead and ask them now. Since we're coming, I guess, close to the end of this stream. So, does anyone else have any questions they want to type up? I can give it a few minutes. Guess also in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, if there's anything in particular you want to say, maybe like questions you would hope would be asked but haven't, and you got answers for them, feel free to do that right now.
Oh, no, good. I mean, I really like chaos, to be honest. So I was, like I said, I was down with whatever. Well, I will say that I am not slipping. I'm just going to say that. And for anybody that says that I'm slipping, fuck them. They don't know me, and they never will. There's a reason why I'm saying that, because of someone that I hate, and I always will. So leave me the fuck alone. You know who you are.
So,
is that a little bit too much?
No, that's fine. That kind of stuff happens. If you're like in music or like any similar thing, you're eventually going to run into people that just are going to have a problem with whatever it is you're doing.
Well, it's just funny for someone to, I don't know, throwing around the word slipping with me is not wise. That's all. It's just weird. People find something to twist, and they will, and it's just strange. It's almost like a crab mentality. Like, people won't help each other out, and if somebody feels like they're getting across somewhere else, someone will try to pull them down, because you cannot not escape this bucket, not without my help and my approval.
Yep, so got 2 more questions, it looks like. So, from Chris, we got, if you had to make a statement for what your band's message is that you would say to everyone, what would it be?
We are soundtracks for splintered consciousness.
Yep. And also, last question, it's 2 questions, I can kind of like roll them into one. So what are some of your future projects? What can we expect in terms of like future collaborations from Nahja Mora?
I've written, okay, let me phrase this a little bit differently. The last album is only half of what it was. There's another chunk of it that I need to release. Then I've written an EP that is politically influenced. I'd like to take a song from every other album and redo it, and one song that we very much like playing live and has kind of come into an entirely different monster is Inside Out, and there's an EP we are recording that is a message about America's violent culture, or culture of violence. I would call it that way. I mean, black culture, culture of violence, but I would say it's a culture of violence. I'm also working on another EP that I don't really have a name for right now. I don't really have a working title that I'm willing to share either. That is kind of mystical in its message, and I want to make something positive, something that will help people grow a little bit more directly, but remain interesting. I just made a very, very dark record that I describe as a dark ride, and I'm going to be releasing an EP that is also a dark ride, but not everything is dark. You can't understand darkness if you don't also recognize the light. So there is going to be something that will be light in color, but not light in sound.
So I guess that mostly wraps up the interview. Thank you for being on here. Apologies if I'm a little awkward. This is kind of my first time doing this kind of interview thing.
Don't apologize. You are beautiful, beautiful. Don't worry about that. We're all new to everything, every moment. Nothing ever changes. God just rearranges, as one of the only good things Justice George ever said. But you were great. Don't apologize.
Yep.
Thank you for your time, man.
Thank you for the excellent interview. Definitely heard like a lot of great answers to these questions. I know, I guess, I kind of have my own biases, obviously, but if I had never heard Nahja Mora, or at least from this interview, this would make me want to go out and immediately check it out, which people you can do. You can look up Nahja Mora on Bandcamp. There's like all their music. I believe most, or not all the music is on there. I am seeing quite a lot of stuff in there. There's been some new material released lately, and if you see them on tour, definitely check them out as well. Yep, and so for people who are just coming on who might have missed stuff, I'm pretty sure I'm going to post the entire video because I've had it recorded as a video too. I'm not quite sure where I will post it yet, but it will get posted where I put the video on the event page for this on Facebook, as well as through like a few other channels, just so everyone knows, so that they can make sure they see the entire interview, because if you missed some stuff, it's been a really great interview.
Thank you. This is the best way to do it on a smartphone.
Right. Yep, so I think we're gonna log off now. Thank you everyone for being in the chat and asking great questions. And I guess I will see most of you soon, during my next stream.
I'll be back. I'll see you, Sassy. Thank you.